The whole point of art is to ask questions and create space where we do look at hard things and talk about hard things. It worries me that political appeasement is becoming a new curatorial framework. I just need it to make sense because I don't even understand what Sabsabi is saying with his work that is so offensive.
I don't think that either the journalist nor the politician who raised the question had ever seen either of those works in question. Not at any point questioning his authority or his expertise to speak about contemporary art.
This raises so many scary questions, a terrifying precedent about censorship.
Welcome to the Installation Art Podcast, the world's #1 and only podcast about installation art and the people who work with it. I am your host, Anastasia Parmson. Before we get into today's episode, I want to acknowledge the scheduling gap that's kind of happening at the moment. As you may have noticed, I haven't been publishing new episodes as regularly as planned. That's because my art career had to take priority for a while. I've been deep in applications, organization, and just general life stuff and finishing up some new works. And it's taking a lot of time and energy. It turns out that balancing the podcast with a full-time art practice, as well as everything else I've got going on, has been, let's just say, a work in progress. When I first launched this show, I wanted to release a new episode every 2 weeks. And I still hope to be able to return to that schedule. But for now, episodes will have to come out whenever they come out, whenever I'm able to schedule, record, and edit them. So if you want to make sure that you don't forget about this show and you don't miss any new releases, the best thing to do is to subscribe to our email updates at installationartpodcast.com. That way, each episode will land directly in your inbox. Now, today's episode is a little different. It's not an interview about someone's work, but more of a conversation about recent events in the art world. I'm experimenting with a more journalistic angle, reporting on an unfolding drama with the help of a guest host. So please be kind and gentle. This is something completely new to me. I have invited American English curator, art historian, and consultant Carrie Scott to join me in unpacking a major controversy that has shocked the Australian art world. Maybe you have already seen headlines about Australia's selection for the 2026 Venice Biennale Pavilion and the sudden cancellation of that selection. I wanted to talk about it on this show, not only because it's happening on my own home turf, or because I have some feelings about the events, but mainly because the Venice Biennale is one of the most important platforms for experimental installation art, and we have talked about it in several previous episodes. And also because the artist at the center of this controversy, Khaled Sabsabi, has been on my radar for his very thoughtful installation work. You may already know my co-host, Carrie Scott, from social media, where she shares insightful takes and champions the ideas and practices she is passionate about. I wanted to invite her for this bonus episode to be kind of a guest host and get an international perspective from someone who has their finger on the art world pulse. I thought it would be valuable to hear her reaction to what's been unfolding here in Australia and what it might mean for the wider art world. Here is my conversation with Carrie Scott. Welcome to the Installation Art Podcast. It's a great honor to have you, and thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Thrilled to have made the time, to be honest. I was like, oh, this is going to be nice. I'm going to have a good conversation to start the day. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah. Before we start, just tell me, when I got in touch with you, had you heard anything about this Australian Pavilion debacle?
You want to know what? I had seen, I think it was an article in The Guardian. I think I read it and was like, I don't understand what's going on there. I'm sure there'll be another article about it. And then there wasn't. And so I dropped it until I got your email.
And have you looked into it since?
Well, yes, because I was terrified of talking to you and being completely ignorant.
All right. So my idea was to basically talk you through the sequence of events surrounding the controversy of the 2026 Australian Pavilion, more or less in chronological order, just so that you and the listeners know what's happened so far. Feel free to jump in at any time with questions or reactions that you have in the moment. And then after that, I'd love to hear your thoughts, not just on the situation itself, but what it might mean to the artist-curator duo, what might be the potential repercussions on the Australian Pavilion, or the broader implications to the art world and arts funding.
Great. Well, I pulled together a bunch of questions and I was going to say to you, come on, Anastasia, like tell us the deal, because the news over here is half baked.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, well, I can tell you as we go along what's happened, and you can tell me what has been your side of the story. Okay. So basically, what happened was late 2024, the artist Khaled Sabsabi and his collaborator curator Michael Dagostino find out in private that they have been selected to represent Australia at the next Venice Biennale.
Do we know, how does all that actually happen? You know, it's
How
all like
did
cloak
they
and
get
dagger.
picked?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in Australia, the way it works is Creative Australia, which is formerly known as Australia Council, it's the country's official arts council, and they serve as the main arts funding and advisory body for the government. So they are in charge of essentially nominating whoever represents Australia at Venice. And they outsource it to a panel of artists, curators, arts professionals. And this panel, I think there's like an application process. I don't know who gets to apply. I don't think it's like an open competition. It's just like Khaled Sabsabi and Michael Dagostino. I think it was their second time applying. And so there's a short list of artists, there's interviews and like long process. And then the panel decides and presents their sort of opinion, I guess, to Creative Australia. And Creative Australia is like, yes, tick, let's go with that. So everyone's on board. The decision is announced in early February publicly. And the CEO of Creative Australia, Adrian Collette, said, quote, that the selected project reflects the diversity and plurality of Australia's rich culture. Then, only days later, things start to unravel. There's a business gossip columnist who publishes an article in The Australian titled, "Your Taxpayer Dollars at Work, Arts Council Takes Creative Approach to Racism." Pretty inflammatory title. And in the article, I mentioned two of Sabsabi's early works that are almost 20 years old. One which depicts Hezbollah's former leader, and another depicts the 9/11 attack. The next day after this article comes out, there's a question raised about it in the parliament. So what I want to note is that I don't think that either the journalist nor the politician who raised the question had ever seen either of those works in question. They probably never saw any of Sabsabi's works at all in person. But they're drawing conclusions about what the work is about, making it kind of a big deal. So what we know is that after the question time in Parliament, there was a phone call between the CEO of Creative Australia and the Minister for the Arts. They have both assured that there was no political pressure on anything, but we don't know. We also know that only hours after that phone call, an emergency board meeting was convened. Creative Australia board unanimously decides to rescind the appointment. And the reason for that being cited as risk to social cohesion and their wish to avoid divisive narratives. Obviously, the backlash from the Australian art world is immediate and huge because Creative Australia purports to support the arts and artists, and this is not very supportive. So there's a Melbourne-based art criticism journal Memo. They publish an open letter to support the artistic team, to condemn the decision. And as of today, there are more than 4,000 people who have signed onto that open letter. The former MCA, Sydney's Contemporary Art Museum director, and seasoned curator Lisanne McGregor also published a blistering op-ed calling the decision, quote, a knee-jerk reaction and a failure to stand up for the artistic freedom. And then other shortlisted artists from this year's Biennale selection all collectively signed a letter demanding the reinstatement of Sabsabi and Dagostino and essentially letting Creative Australia know that none of them are going to step up to take this now radioactive position because everyone in the art circles are saying it would be career suicide to do that. A couple of weeks later, there was a Senate estimates hearing in Parliament where the CEO, the chair of Creative Australia, and the arts minister are questioned about this decision and like the process that led to it. From that hearing, we learned that the biggest issue for them was the work titled Thank You Very Much from 2006. If you Google it, you can easily find it. It's only an 18-second long video that shows images that we've all seen of planes crashing in the Twin Towers on 9/11, and then a treated clip of President George W. Bush at the end of an address saying, thank you very much. That's it. That's the whole work. And apparently that was what caused them to make this drastic decision. At the estimates hearing, we also learn that the artist was never given a chance to speak to the board before being cancelled or to defend or explain his older works. We also learned that Creative Australia didn't seek any legal advice before rescinding their decision. They didn't even consider legal ramifications and the costs of breaching their side of the contract. And the CEO also admits that the pavilion might have to be empty in 2026. One of the senators calls it an international embarrassment. Then starts the domino effect. Sabsabi's gallerist warns in public that this decision will set in motion the, quote, dismantling of the artist's career. And the first example of that happened at like 6 weeks after the cancellation. An exhibition that he was supposed to be part in at Monash University Museum of Art is suddenly and indefinitely postponed despite being in the works for like 18 months prior. And the university says it needed more time to, quote, engage with the community. But basically, all I've heard from commentators is that it's a case of institutional risk aversion triggered by Creative Australia's actions and their failure to support artists, basically. Then, about just over a month ago, Sabsabi finally speaks out. He gives several interviews with key publications and podcasts and describes the events as devastating. He says he's not been able to sleep. He's had nightmares. He says that Creative Australia never asked him to give any context or try to defend his work. And apparently, him and his curator friend and collaborator are now still planning to somehow make the project happen at Venice independently through crowdfunding. Yeah, so they've sent out like a plea for help, and it sounds like it would be a really great work about inclusivity. We don't know much more about that, but it would definitely be an installation work based on Sabsabi's previous body of work. There's also been a lot of calls for resignation. Colette, the CEO of Creative Australia, has been called to resign by many, many people. There has been some resignations among the staff. One of the board members, who is a renowned Australian artist, Lindy Lee, has resigned from the board after that. We know that their own staff, more than 40 people, issued a letter expressing no confidence for the leadership and the CEO, calling out a culture of fear, discrimination, and mismanagement. But the CEO is still the CEO of Creative Australia. The board is still the same board. Nothing really has happened in the last 3 months since this debacle began. And they insist that the decision wasn't about the art or the meaning of the art or the merit of the artist, but about, quote, avoiding divisive public debate, which, of course, every commentator says it's exactly what they sparked with this decision. So that brings us to now. I don't know, maybe there's some details that I've missed, but I'm definitely curious to hear what you have heard of this story, how it has been presented in the media where you are, and then also what's your initial reaction?
Oh man. Well, this just feels like the most bumpy road. Like it doesn't make any sense, right? The whole point of art is to ask questions and create space where we do look at hard things and talk about hard things. And so to pull the carpet out from under any of this just seems wildly misguided. As I said to you at the beginning, right? There was one Guardian article that came out initially that didn't give anywhere near as much context as you had. It just stated that Creative Australia had announced that they were done, and it was because their work was exploring themes of war and identity and propaganda. And I read it and I was so confused by it. Like I was like, who did what did where? That I mean, I don't mind saying it. I ignored it because I was like, there'll be another article that does this better. And then I didn't see anything about it until you wrote, and then I looked into it. And as you said, right, it just seems that there are these two works, you and Thank You Very Much, which were both done like 2006, 2007, that seem to have...
When he was barely out of his master's degree. It may have been even done during his school years still.
Right. And like they just seem to have been pulled out of the back catalog as something that they're offensive. And I guess I saw the words, they glorify terrorism. So when I read that, I then was like, right, okay, let's go find the Thank You Very Much piece, because I have a personal affiliation, attachment, trauma. I have personal trauma. I was in New York during September 11th. You know, there is a generational trauma that isn't spoken about of everyone that was on that island that day. I was evacuated. I was standing in the streets when the first towers hit, right? Like even talking about it, my heart goes up, right? Like, and so I don't like work that is glib or even addresses it, right? I can't remember the name of the painter. There was a Hazard and Worth, a young painter who did an installation. What is her name? I can't remember. She did a whole thing where in the exhibition itself, she recreated the elevator shaft of one of the trade towers and then put all these threaded papers on the floor. So you walked around looking at her painting, and then you were sort of negotiating the waste of the paper. And I remember just being like, no, this isn't it. And I wasn't offended by it, but I was like, this is not what happened that day. This doesn't capture it. And she was a child when it happened. She was in New York, and she was trying to recreate that feeling of destruction. So, like I said, I have a very personal, if I'm going to get offended, I'm going to get offended about people making work about September 11th. And I watched that footage. I watched the video. And this, I think, is important to note. It's all found footage that he took, right? So it's like, it's not the media outlets' coverage of it. It's not a fixed viewpoint. It is handheld, crappy, not iPhone footage. It's like raw and urgent and terrifying. So the opposite of glorifying. It's like you can feel in the way it's recorded this sort of anxiousness, I think. And then it cuts to the George Bush clip that is very polished and obviously comes from a media outlet. And the contrast of those two things is jarring. And you sit there and you have to ask, what is this artist trying to do? And in my mind, it's nuance. He's raising all these questions about whether September 11th ultimately, was it good for the United States? Did it give them an excuse to embark on a 10-year horrible war? Did it get people to rally around George Bush? Yeah. Like, his approval ratings went through the roof. I didn't vote for him going in to September 11th, but I'll tell you what, he came to the trade towers. He stood in that rubble. I mean, I like even saying it, I'm getting goosebumps. Like, he stood there and he was our leader, and it felt like we felt safe for a second with him talking.
Yeah.
And I think that this work raises all that. It raises the roller coaster of what an awful event that was, and the kind of domino effect that it did have. And it makes us ask the questions that frankly we should be asking, and that we should have asked at the time and we didn't. And now, I mean, weirdly, I think it makes us look at what's happening right now with all of the wars that are around us about what's right and what's wrong. The fact that war is not black or white. And so I watched it. I had all those thoughts. And then I was like, right, okay, like, is this just personal? And then I was furious because I was like, actually, this work is what we should be looking at, what we should be talking about. That, like, there is no right or wrong in war. And it's all terrible and fine. So, okay, maybe that's hard, and maybe that will lead to hard conversations and people getting pissed off and people getting sad and people feeling angry. But that's kind of our job. You know, like, that's what art is here for. It's to spark debate and emotion and
ask the difficult questions, perhaps.
Right? It worries me that, like, political appeasement is becoming a new curatorial framework. And I think it's a scary, like, who decides what's too controversial for international audiences? The Venice Biennial is the Olympics of the art world. And I think it is a place where we can provoke and we can ask big, scary questions, and that there's a safe space to do that because we are not politicians.
Yeah.
All of us could have gone into politics, but we didn't.
What you say about this work, thank you very much, pretty much was also my first read of it. Like, the moment I saw it, I'm like, that's what it's about. It's asking these questions. And maybe people like business journalists and politicians aren't equipped to decide what's controversial in art or what art is all about, because there's art professionals for that. That's what the panel was for, who decided that Sabsabi's work was the winner.
Exactly. Right. And I mean, it killed me when you said, you were like, I don't even think the politician saw the work, and the idea that like this was taken to Parliament and no one saw the work or let the artist talk about what he was trying to do 20 some odd years ago. And that was the other thing. So I'd love to know your perspective on Sabsabi's work since then.
He's been on my radar, but I haven't actually seen his work in person consciously because I only found out about him in the second half of last year. He had a big exhibition at a really interesting venue, which I didn't get to see outside of Sydney. So, yeah, I cannot even comment. But from what I've seen online and from what I've heard of other people describing it, it's definitely work that aims to raise questions. And it's not in any way prescriptive. And it's kind of, I feel a somewhat personal connection to his work because he is a migrant from Lebanon. So he left his home country. He came to Australia. He felt a bit out of place in Australia, like people didn't really get his work. He went back to Lebanon to try to get his career going there somehow, but they didn't get him there either because you left, you're not part of us, one of us anymore. So like that is an experience that I truly deeply understand. And I think a lot of his work actually also talks about that.
Hmm. Yeah, so he is kind of preoccupied in nuance, right?
Yeah.
And in the lack of, or in that everything has perspective. It's really hard for me to pass judgment from here, right? Because there's no way I could possibly understand all the layers, but it seems bad.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, like, from a perspective of an artist who's in Australia, Creative Australia they are kind of the holders of the biggest opportunities and grants that you can apply for here, like big residencies and stuff. And at this time, there's no way I would want to apply for anything from them because what's the guarantee? Because also a few years ago, there was another artist who received a grant from them, and the grant was then rescinded, and the artist had to take them to court and fight them tooth and nail to get basically a big official apology because, they kind of realized somehow after the fact that what they were going to do was a bit controversial. It had something to do with childbearing, pregnancy, self-insemination, this kind of thing. And yeah, basically they reneged on their contract this wasn't the first time. So like as an artist, I don't want to put in any effort. I have no trust in them as an institution, and they are the institution in Australia.
That's not good. I think that to me smacks of kind of curatorial risk management, right? That like, oh, we gave money to something that might upset someone, and so we've got to pull it. And so someone somewhere started looking at, risk management. And what does that mean for emerging curators going forward and artists, as you say? Like, how can you possibly operate with the fear that, like, you're going to pitch something that is big and complex and heavy hitting and then get it funded and then have them pull it? That just seems, I don't know. It just seems, like I said it before, it just seems bad. There's no other word for it. This all seems bad.
Yeah, well, Sabsabi and Dagostino are saying that basically the only way forward, the only correct action now is to reinstate them and do it fast because time is running out, and to issue an apology. But, seeing that none of the leadership has resigned. It looks like they just are trying to keep their head in the sand and not take any responsibility. They have launched some kind of an inquiry, but the inquiry is to do with the process of the artist selection. And it does not touch on how they then backed out of this contract or how all that happened. And that's partly what prompted the Creative Australia staff to issue this letter of no confidence, saying basically that they don't feel comfortable participating in this inquiry because they're afraid for their job.
So then what on earth are they going to do, right? Is the Australian Pavilion at Venice only open, therefore, to like palatable forms of representation? Okay, great. I mean, I'm sat here thinking, gosh, I wish I could just open another browser window and look to see what has Australia done years prior. Is
Okay,
everything
so
just,
last
yeah, tell
Biennale,
me.
they had the work by Archie Moore, which, by the way, when it was announced, was also criticized. It was about the rate of incarceration of Aboriginal people in Australia. It was a very strong work, and it won the Golden Lion. So, like, all of this comes on the back of this huge Australian success in Venice. And then the next iteration of the Biennale, it's sounding more and more likely that the pavilion might just have to be empty. Or they're maybe trying to get some Indigenous artists in there. But again, it would be kind of, I don't know, like any artist who agrees to that, to fill that void, I can't imagine how they would be perceived in the art world.
Right there. I mean, who also is Creative Australia funded by, the Arts Council in the UK, that's funded by lottery money as well as taxpayer money. Is it the same for you?
As far as I understand it, it's fully funded by the government. I haven't looked into their funding so thoroughly. I don't know if they have any private donation stuff or anything going on, but it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like basically because it was the election year this year, we just had an election a couple of weeks ago. They might have been afraid that if the conservative government got elected, which was looking very likely at the time, then that might affect arts funding if they present something controversial. I don't know. That's just my personal interpretation.
I mean, they're stuck now, though, as you say, right? What do they do? If they don't let Sabsabi do it, then what, like, then it's an empty pavilion as like a protest against, I don't know. And there's also a social cohesion issue here. Like, what does social cohesion mean in this context? As in, who gets to define what we feel, what we think, what as a society we're allowed to feel and think and talk about? And man, this is like, oh, has Venice said anything about it? Well, no, I mean, Venice has their own.
I haven't seen anything from like the official channel. Well, there was one person who was like privately funding the Australian Pavilion projects. Simon Mordaunt is his name, I believe. And he instantly also stepped back when this announcement was made and said, nope, I'm not funding this anymore. So I don't know if maybe he has partnered with Sabsabi and Dagostino privately for their crowd-funded project. I don't know. But yeah, that was the one person linked to the Biennale outside of the government. Yeah, but what's really shocking for me and that I I really cannot believe that this has happened was the Monash University basically backing out of an exhibition that they had planned for over a year. And it's like, why? Like everyone in the art circles in Australia are seeing that this was a wrong decision to make to cancel him, why are you enforcing that?
And they haven't said anything beyond just, we're not doing it.
No. They
I
haven't
mean,
said they're not doing it. They said they've indefinitely postponed it because they have to consult with the community. Basically, it doesn't mean anything.
what? Okay, and what about the other work? The 2007. I didn't look at that work. What's that one about?
So it's a video installation work with, I think, multiple videos and talking about events in Lebanon. And one of the images is the former Hezbollah leader, Nasrallah, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it depicts him as like these rays of light coming out of his mouth, his eyes, his hands as he's giving a speech. It's not the whole work. There's other visuals there as well. And of course, Sabsabi is uniquely qualified to talk about what's happening there or what was happening there because he is from there and his parents fled to Australia because of the civil war at the time. If you look up anyone who wants to dig deeper, there's a few pretty good podcast interviews with Sabsabi from like the last month or so where he talks about this and he is given the chance to explain the work and he explains it very well, like in his own words, where it's coming from, what it's about. Again, it's about the nuance, the questioning. It's about war propaganda, things like that.
Right. There's a part of me that's kind of amazed that there hasn't been an official comment from the biennial. Obviously, with the curator's sudden passing, Koyo's, I know they have a lot on their plate, but this is something that's been unfolding for time. And
Yeah,
so,
it's been over 3 months now.
yes, you would think somebody there would weigh in, or maybe they just stay out of it. I don't know enough about the process actually, and I sort of know
Yeah, me
how it works
neither.
in America in terms of picking the person and how you get right. You have to do a full proposal, and then you do have to sort of not self-fund, but you've got to go find the patrons to help back it. America doesn't pay for the pavilion outright. They pay for
Right.
some of it, and then you go and get patrons to support it. But what I don't know is, do the pavilions themselves, so the countries themselves, have to submit what they're going to show to a group of people, high up
No, I don't
in
think
the
so.
no, so you
Mm-mm.
can just do whatever.
I think, yeah. Yeah, I've never heard of them having to get a green light on whatever they're doing from the artists and whoever I've spoken to who have exhibited there.
But they must have some, because then why have a curator, like an overarching curator of the whole thing, right? Who comes up with a theme and then looks at what's happening. So there must be.
I think, from what I understand, the national pavilions are their own thing. They are not in any way linked to the curator's theme or the group exhibition that's in the central pavilion and in the Arsenale. That's each iteration's curator's project, and then the national pavilions are completely separate from that. I guess we also have to raise this because as we were planning this conversation, the tragic events happened. The revolutionary appointment of Kouoh as the curator for the next Biennale and her unexpected sudden passing, which, raises for me more questions because I don't know how the system works. What happens now with the whole Biennale exhibition? Like, do they have a backup? Did they have a team who's on top of the project and knows what was supposed to happen and what Kououh's plan was, I cannot imagine.
No, and no one has a plan for that, right? She was 57 years
No.
old. But like,
Yeah, she was very
absolutely.
young, and it's a great loss because, yeah, she was going to be the first Black woman to curate it. She had a really interesting plan, from what I hear, about really highlighting African artists and Black artists. It would have been a really great concept.
Yeah, and as you say, first African women to curate the show, for sure was going to be sort of landmark and historic. So it sucks on so many levels. She also, I mean, her legacy is beyond, beyond, beyond.
Yeah,
You
such a
know,
fascinating person with so many really interesting ideas and thought processes.
yeah. And in the context of this conversation, you almost want her here to be like, hey, what's your take? Right? This is a woman who, of course, she had a Pan African focus, but I think was interested in nuance and in centering narratives that have been pushed to the side and thinking about and talking about perspective. And so you'd think that she'd see this and feel how we felt and maybe go to bat for Sasabi. I don't know. It's yeah, and this is the funny thing about the art world, right? Is that you and I are sat here. I mean, I've been in this for more than 20 years now, and I don't know really, not really, how Venice works, right? I've been to it. I I know artists very well who have showed there. I know artists who will be showing next year very well. But it's all like, well, how does it work? And who's paying for what? And is there someone behind the scenes actually making this all happen? Or is it as thin ice as it feels like it is with the news that we're talking about today? That like an artist can get picked up by a journalist who thinks, oof, nope, not for me, doesn't really try to get it, doesn't call somebody like you or me and say, hey, make this make sense. What is it? I'm offended. I'm mad. I don't like this. Is he glorifying terrorism? So some journalist picks it up and it becomes a story that it isn't. And and then, oh my God, now like my head is like, well, hang on. Who is this journalist and what's his agenda? Because he's probably got one, right? Like or she, I don't know if it's a he or she. I know that
Yeah,
it was a female politician, right, who took it
yeah.
to parliament. Um yeah, okay, so what's his agenda? What was the journalist's agenda? What was he trying to do? And indeed, what was the politician's agenda? Like did they
Yeah.
need something in their pocket for some reason to look like they were having a you know, there's just again, there's so many nuances and so many sides to the story that I'm sure there's an answer in here somewhere. But again, I feel like that's the whole point of Sasabi's entire project is to make us be like, why? Why does any of this stuff happen in the first place?
Well, I heard the journalist talk after the fact, and he was prompted to write this article because he started getting messages from people. So he's obviously got some contacts in some areas who maybe have some interest in arts funding or who knows what, I don't know. But yeah, he started getting messages, so that's why he looked into it. And he was like kind of saying, "Oh, well, I don't know anything, but my job is to ask the questions." And then afterwards, it kind of sounded like he believed it was the right decision to rescind the appointment. He just thought it was wrong that they appointed him in the first place. He kind of thought that that was the correct choice and that the older works were too scandalous or something, and they should have known, and they should have. He was saying something about how a quick Google search would have come up with these older works, and that Creative Australia should have done their due diligence. not at any point questioning his authority or his expertise to speak about contemporary art, unfortunately. Kind of reeks of male audacity, let's be honest.
Let's be honest. It also just completely undermines the independence of art institutions and sets like a terrifying precedent about censorship.
Yeah.
Based on I guess political sensitivities, right? So as you say, you said male, right? Like who's to say that next year some female artist who has said, you know what, the oppression of women for decades is not okay, and some writer is like, oh, actually, no, thank you, and so they come for that. It's that age old thing of, okay, who are they coming for next? What are we not allowed to say? And again, I would come back to what I said very briefly, but like, we're not politicians. This is not politics. The art world is not politics. Art is political, can be political, should be political, in my opinion. Often is political. It's hard to open one's mouth and not be political. Hank Willis Thomas and I had this amazing conversation where he looked at me and he's like, everyone's an activist. You're an activist in waking up. And I was like, really, are you? And since that conversation, I've asked myself that over and over and over. And I was like, no, actually, I think he's right. We are. But the question here is like, what are we allowed to say and talk about? And frankly, I'm not sure that anything. I just need it to make sense, because I don't even understand what Sabsabi is saying with his work that is so offensive. Have any other Americans, right? I'm a British American. I moved to the States when I was 5. I adopted America as my homeland. My heritage, though, is here. I now live in London. Like generations and generations, we are as English gets. But I moved to America and I adopted that place as my own. It raised me. I have a very American outlook, I think, on life. And so I'm sat here wondering, like, has any other American weighed in here and said, oof, actually, no, it does glorify terrorism and it is anti-American.
I haven't seen anything from American perspective, but we do have a lot of American listeners, so hopefully they can chime in and tell us. But I did hear with my own ears the chair of Creative Australia saying that the footage in Thank You Very Much was graphic. And I'm like, how is it graphic? We were all stood in front of our TVs watching it wherever we were at the time. It's tragic, yes, it's horrifying, but I wouldn't use the word graphic. I thought it was such a strange turn of phrase.
If you'll indulge me for a minute more, I'm going to give you another personal account of September 11th. So obviously I was there on the day. I was in Union Square when the first tower fell. So far enough away that I wasn't covered in ash, but close enough that like we had no idea what was happening. So cell phones weren't working, TVs weren't working, nothing. We had no idea. So it was terrifying. And in the days after, the news channels didn't share footage straight away of the planes being hit, I don't think. And what was published in the New York Times, and I still have, I think I have September 12th and September 13th. I have those 2 papers, which is bizarre because I'm not somebody who hoards anything, but I've held on to those because it was obviously such a huge thing for me and everybody there. But those pictures, they were not graphic. And then I was in the UK that Christmas, seeing my dad and my extended family, my half brother and half sister. And you know how the newspapers do like pictures in review or the year in review or that sort of thing. And the pictures that were published here were the most graphic pictures I had ever seen. So the US never published pictures of people falling out of buildings. That image that everyone sees of the man upside down. And so the first time I saw that was 3-4 months later here. And that was graphic. Like, you want to talk about graphic? That was graphic. What Sabsabi pictured, and thank you very much, was exactly as I described it. It was like the footage that somebody took on the street on it. It was not a photojournalist taking a picture of a war scene. It's amateur footage of terror, right? Of panic. And so graphic is the last word that I used to describe what I saw in that video. And did I look at it and say, wait, what, why are we looking at this? I don't want to look at this. Yes. Did it make me feel uncomfortable? Yes. Did I want to see it? No. Did I want to, like, a warning label? Maybe, but I knew what I was getting myself into because I had read the language around it. But like graphic, I saw on Instagram yesterday, and I have no idea why I saw it. There's some camera footage of a policeman who shoots down a shooter in a gym. I don't know enough about this. I saw it last night and I immediately literally threw my phone across the room, was like, God damn it, Instagram. Like, I don't want to see that. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a policeman kill the bad guy. I'm not interested in that. That's graphic. That is a man shooting another man. That's graphic. What Sabsabi? It's not good. I don't know. It's not graphic. It's something else entirely. It's painful. It's awful. But it's about perspective, right? That's the whole. I mean, the more I sit here, the more I think about it. That whole work that's all that's about. Is literally about perspective. The perspective of the people in the city that day. The perspective of the world watching George Bush be a leader in a terrifying moment, and the perspective that actually we now have 20, however many years later, right? The perspective of us looking back at this thing in hindsight and saying, oh, should we have gone to war off the back of that?
Yeah.
No. The answer is no, right? An eye for an eye is not the world I want to live in. So I say no, despite the fact that one of my great friends lost his hearing that day because he was next to the towers when they fell and it blew out his eardrums, right? Despite the fact that I know people that died, despite the fact that I was there and am still, like, that's a trauma I will carry with me for the rest of my life, as will every single New Yorker. But do I believe in an eye for an eye? No. God, I didn't think I was going to get quite so personal about this. Thanks a lot, Anastasia.
Well, that is a great perspective, and I had no idea that you had been in New York at the time, so it adds an even more interesting personal layer and your perspective as somebody who was there. It's definitely very powerful and useful for the audience to hear. Now, as a curator, how would you respond if you were in the shoes of Michael Dagostino and this team for Venice Biennale and this happened?
Okay, so personally, I would probably double down, right? Here's hoping that D'Agostino really did believe in what he was doing and that he does double down and say, okay, fine. If I can't do it with Creative Australia, I'll do it somehow. But that's kind of who I am, right? And I'm saying that I am not, you can ask people close to me, I am not very good at playing the political game, for better or for worse, and probably to the detriment of my career. And I've never been in his shoes. It's a huge, not a burden, but this is a huge appointment, to represent Australia at Venice. It is the Olympics. It is the biggest thing that we have in the art world. And so I imagine for him, for both of them, that, well, as you said, Sabsabi is losing sleep and has been hugely affected by this being taken away. And I would guess also it must be awful to have your work misunderstood, because he's not out here saying, well, yeah, but I was trying to glorify terrorism. You read it right. He's saying, hang on, you've completely missed the point here. So that must be awful. But yeah, I think if I I was in their shoes, I would double down. I would do a crowdfunder. I would phone a friend and say, hang on a minute, this really matters. Because I think it does matter. And I've asked a bunch of questions this morning to you or your evening, being like, right, well, who decides what's too controversial for international audiences, right? Who decides what can be shown and what can be said? Who decides what the dominant narrative is? This raises so many scary questions that I think I'd feel a responsibility toward making sure that there's kind of greater transparency and artistic freedom. So yeah, I think I'd do exactly what they're doing, trying to make it happen without Creative Australia behind them.
Yeah. I will try to look up the information because I saw kind of a call out on Instagram from their part for people who want to help. I'll try to look it up and put in the show notes the information about it if any of the listeners want to help somehow. I don't know what kind of help. Is it only financial or any other form of help? But I'm sure they would be grateful just to get even the moral support from an international audience. That would be helpful for them.
Yeah. There was an article that was put out posthumously from Koyo where she talks about like the importance of her role, not as a personal milestone, but as a precedent for future generations. And so again, you think, what would she feel here? Where would she come down on this and how would she interpret it or fight for it?
Yeah. I might put some links to interviews with her. I recently listened to, if people are interested in diving into her career and the kind of monumental work she had achieved, I'll put some links to that because, yeah, as I said, she was a very interesting, very thoughtful person who really, really achieved a lot and had very like deep critical ways of looking at the art world internationally, not just in Africa.
Yeah. It's a conundrum, this one. I want it to make sense and it doesn't.
No, I guess we'll just have to wait and see the developments. I kind of wanted to make this episode like straight away, like, yeah. But then I thought, well, I'll wait and see what happens next. And I have to say, I have been kind of disappointed that there hasn't been more resignations, more action. It's just kind of gone quiet, and I am worried because, like I said, I might want to apply for something through Creative Australia, and I really don't want to now. I don't feel confident in doing that at this time with this current leadership and this current situation. Hopefully, there will be some more positive developments in the next few months, and then also we'll find out what happens with the Biennale overall.
Yeah, it's just, it kind of begs belief that we're here, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, hang on, do I need to go dig some more? Like, is Sabsabi, am I missing something? Is it really these two works that did it? Is there a work I don't know about? Is he actually like this bad man? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some people in Australia have suggested that this is racial or like anti-Muslim kind of move, that it's linked to the fact that Sabsabi had boycotted, I think it was the Sydney Festival, because there was some funding for one of the performances from the government of Israel because he was pro-Palestine. I don't know. Like, there are people here who are speculating that this might be part of it. It's just speculation at this stage. I told you pretty much everything that came out through the Senate hearing, and it really wasn't that much information. It was really, shockingly sparse. And of course, they haven't released the minutes from that fateful board meeting where in less than an hour they allegedly unanimously decided to rescind the offer. I would love to see the minutes of that meeting.
I mean, and also if it's funded by the government, those details should be in the public domain, no?
Yeah, they should be. They might become public at some point. I don't know how it works.
I think also from your perspective, right, there's the thing I haven't said out loud about whether artists who critique systems of power, can they work safely within those systems? Right. And that's the scariest one in all of this.
Have you seen anything like this kind of what it seems to be political pressure on art institutions in the UK?
I mean, Lubaina Hamid is representing GB in Venice, and she does not shy away from anything. This is a woman who spent 40 years championing British artists, non-dominant narratives. This is a woman who has patiently waited for her time and has said it all. So, in stark contrast, she's representing us, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, is epic. So, no one's coming to mind. I don't know that I've seen anything this overt. I'm sure I'll get off this call and be like, oh wait, I should have said that, but I can't think of anything quite so obvious. It's bad.
Yeah.
I said bad like 6 times. I've no other word for it. This feels bad. This does not feel good.
Yeah, the only word I can think of saying that I'll have to bleep out is it's a shit show.
Yeah. Well, thank you for walking me through it, because as I said at the top, I started looking into it. I was like, wait, what? But it sounds like, wait, what is the ongoing sentiment?
Yeah. Well, thank you for providing your unique perspective to the story.
Keep us posted, please, Anastasia.
If there's any big updates, I will definitely talk about it on the show. Yeah. Hopefully there will be news coming that they've been reinstated and it's all going ahead.
Hopefully.
Well, thanks, Carrie. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you for the context and the perspective. And even though I'm going to put this down and be mad for the next however long.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to ruin your day.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good evening. Thanks so much.
That was Carrie Scott, based in London. You can find out more about her work on her website, carrie-scott.com, and definitely go check out her videos on Instagram at Carrie Scott Curates. Links to those, as well as everyone mentioned in this episode, are in the show notes and on our website, installationartpodcast.com. And by the way, the day after recording this episode, Monash University reversed their decision and confirmed that they will in fact go ahead with the previously planned exhibition featuring Khaled Sabsabi's work. This is probably due to mounting pressure from both the artistic community and student-led protests on campus, including Muslim student groups who raised concerns about institutional censorship. And there's been another development. The chair of Creative Australia, Robert Morgan, has announced his intention of early retirement. In a statement, Sabsabi's representative Josh Milani described the shift in leadership as a, quote, welcome opportunity to open a pathway towards reinstatement, and that it, quote, would help Khaled Sabsabi recover from the ongoing damage being done to his reputation, health, and livelihood. This story is clearly still unfolding, and I will do my best to keep you posted on any major developments. In the meantime, if you want to be the first to know when new episodes drop, remember to subscribe to our email updates on installationartpodcast.com. That way, each new episode will land directly in your inbox. Thank you for listening, and until next time.